Hey guys, this week Lab 12 is over ecology. So ecology is the study of interactions between organisms and their environment. This includes both biotic factors and abiotic factors. So biotic factors of the environment, bio means life, anything that is living. So if you're talking about the SFA campus, biotic factors of this environment would be students, professors, squirrels, bacteria, trees, plants, like anything alive. Abiotic, adding that prefix a, that means not or without. So that would be not living or without life. So SFA environmental factors that are abiotic would be lampposts, benches, cement, the air, the dirt, anything that is not alive. So this lab, we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to talk about biogeochemical cycles, and we're going to talk about the movement of energy. So for biogeochemical cycles, these involve bio, means there's a biological component to it. So the living things that are involved in the cycle. Geo is geological. Geology is comprised of the earth and its atmosphere. So anything that has to do with the atmosphere or the earth is the geo part of the biogeochemical cycles. And then chemical, this is water, oxygen, nitrogen, ammonia, carbon dioxide, anything like that. So that's how we get biogeochemical cycles. And each one of these that we're going to talk about has each of these components in it. As far as these go, though, Earth is a closed ecosystem. So what that means is that what we've got is what we've got. The oxygen that we currently have on the Earth is the oxygen that we're always going to have. There's no source to bring more in, and there's no way to remove it. So whether it's, combined with hydrogen to make water, or whether it's just the oxygen we're breathing, or whatever compounds that it is joined to, what we've got is what we've got. So if you want to follow along in your lab manual, we'll talk about 3 of these biogeochemical cycles. So with the oxygen cycle, it's pretty simple. You've got living organisms like rabbits, people, cows, plants even, that take in oxygen as part of their respiration. Now, respiration does not necessarily mean breathing. It is a process that goes on at the cellular level that oxygen is required for. So during respiration, we breathe in the oxygen, it gets taken through our body by our blood to the cells. The cells use it for respiration. Water is a byproduct, so water gets released, plants absorb that water. Remember when we talked about photosynthesis, we learned that in that process, plants split a water molecule and release the oxygen back into the air. So you can see how this is just a cycle, how it goes from the air into a living creature, down into the ground, used by plants, and the water split back into the air. So that's how it's the oxygen cycle. Carbon is slightly more complex. It's not terribly more complex, but a little bit, because it also involves fossil fuels, that sort of thing. And it's not just people or living organisms that are involved. Anytime we're burning coal or oil, gas for our cars, most electricity comes from these. That's all involved with the carbon. So plants pull carbon dioxide out of the air during photosynthesis and fix it as glucose. Animals will then eat that. They ingest it, they assimilate it, it makes it part of them. Some of it gets removed through their waste, some of it just stays in the ground when they die, and then it can be decomposed by various organisms, decay by bacteria and fungi, or like with the dinosaurs, they turned into oil and gas that we now harvest. But it gets back into the atmosphere. Plants will then take it back out of the atmosphere, and it just keeps going. The only other one we're going to talk about is the nitrogen cycle. The atmosphere is full of nitrogen. 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. However, it is in the form of N2, which is just two nitrogen atoms bonded together. And that is not a form of nitrogen that most living things can use. So nitrogen has to be fixed. So lightning can fix it and send it into the ground. There are several types of bacteria that go through nitrogen fixation, leave it in the soil, or some of them are even in a symbiotic relationship with plants, such as legumes. So peanuts, beans, that sort of thing. They actually have a place in their roots that there are types of bacteria that live there, and the plants feed the bacteria sugars, glucose from from their photosynthesis. And in return, these bacteria fix the nitrogen from the air into a form that is usable for animals and leave it in the plants. So for herbivores and carnivores to get it, we have to eat the plants or eat the animal that ate the plants. But then it can be part of us when we die. It can be part of what goes into the ground to then be picked up again by plants or through our waste. And then there's all kinds of bacteria and fungi that work on those. It'll end up back in the atmosphere. It can keep going in this circle. So it's a little bit complex, but you can follow all of the arrows in this and understand how nitrogen is used, and it is in a cycle. The other thing we're going to talk about is the movement of energy. Where the movement of energy is concerned, Earth is an open ecosystem. So think for just a second about where we might get some new energy into the Earth. If you said from the sun, because plants use it for photosynthesis, that is completely correct. That is where we get new energy, comes from the sun, and plants are the ones, or photosynthetic organisms, not just plants. We learned last week about Euglena and some of the others that also, different types of bacteria that photosynthesize. So this is where we get new energy. And then, something eats the plant, something eats that. It goes through this big food chain or food web. These can be really complex when you get a whole ecosystem working together, but food webs are composed of producers, consumers, and decomposers. And at each level, you lose some of the energy. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second with a pyramid. First, I want to show you a food web. So this would be like, this tree got got the sunlight, turned it into sugars. You've got a bug that's going to eat some of the leaves on this tree. There's a bird that's going to eat this insect. And then this owl may come and eat this bird. So this is your producer. This is your primary consumer. Primary consumers eat, for the purposes of this class, primary consumers are strict herbivores. They only eat plants. And then you've got a secondary consumer. Even though this bird could eat nuts or berries or something, they also eat the insects that have eaten the plants. So we're going to call them a secondary. And then you've got an owl over here that would be the tertiary consumer. And you could even have this wolf eat this owl. And then you've got a quaternary consumer. This is a very simplified food web. Most of them actually look more like this. This is for a marine system. And if you look really closely, you can see all these different types. There's cod, here's the different birds that will fish in the ocean, and various things. There are fish that will jump up and eat those birds. And so it's really kind of complex how food webs actually work. We talked about the transfer of energy, or I mentioned that only a certain amount of energy goes. So producers basically take 100% of the sun's energy, and they can harness that and turn it into that they soak up. They can take 100% of that energy and use it all or store it. Primary consumers, though, you only get 10% of whatever they had moving on. So let's say that you had a plant that managed to get 10,000 calories from sunlight. I'm just picking a random number. So 10,000 calories are a measure of energy. 10,000 calories in this plant. You get, the beetle that comes along and eats some of the leaves of the plant. Well, it's only going to get 10% of that energy. So it's only going to get 1,000 calories out of it. And then you have this bird, that secondary consumer, that comes and eats the beetle. Well, that's only going to get 10% of whatever the beetle had. So we're down to only 100 calories for the secondary consumers. And then by the time you get to a tertiary consumer, you're down to 10 calories because it can only get 10% of the energy from that bird. So if this is if this tertiary consumer is your owl, it's down to only getting 10 calories. And then if you have a wolf that eats the owl, it only can get 1 calorie out of it. So even though we start with 10,000 with the plant, it's reduced through each trophic level. So this is why sometimes you'll hear the animals like cheetahs will call off an attack if it's going to require more energy, that they have to spend more energy getting whatever their prey is than they'll actually get from it. And this is also why a lot of food webs and ecosystems are limited in the number of trophic levels that they can have, because there's just not enough energy to get passed along.